This quiet off season leads me to believe that there are far more questions than answers as we head into camp with September right around the corner.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. I just wanted to take a quick second and just send my condolences and love to the Gaudreau family, as well as everybody who is, unfortunately honoring the brothers today due to it being the first anniversary of their tragic passing. Completely avoidable incident, and they should still be here. But let's talk about some questions, because the Flames have certainly left us with a lot of those. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you through the off season, and we'll be back to daily shows before you know it. So let's kick it off with the age-old question that we talk about a lot here on the show, and that is, of course, what are we going to do with all these players? There are a lot of players fighting for roster spots, and there are very few roster spots available. And I know that we talk about the log jam here a lot on this show. It feels like it is a weekly occurrence at this point, and it has been a big concern for last season, but also heading into this season when there were opportunities to move on from certain players and nothing came to fruition. So right now, the crowded forward group, shout out to the win column for putting together this depth chart for the forward group, as well as the defensive pairings, because we have plenty to talk about with both of those groups. Right now, the projected lineup is Jonathan Huberdeau, Kadri, Coronado, Connor Zary, once he's re-signed, Backlund and Coleman, Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, and Sharon Govich, Lomberg, Pospisil, and Klapka. And then your three extras are Dryden Hunt, Justin Kirkland, and Adar Suniev. Out of that fourth group, I think Suniev is the player that should be taken heavily into consideration as the next man up, as a player that could crack the lineup and make a real difference in terms of scoring, which we will talk more about the lack of scoring in a little bit. But this forward group is not very different from what we saw last year, and there really isn't a way to make it different if you're not willing to trade some players. And I'm looking at this right here, and Ryan Lomberg would be a fine trade target. Adam Klapka, I'm interested to see where and how he performs this season, because I think it was very unexpected in terms of his little resurgence, or not resurgence, him kind of coming into his own on that top line. I certainly did not have that on my bingo card, but I love being pleasantly surprised. And you are not going to be able to integrate players like Suniev or Rory Currens or, Cole Rushney when the time comes without trading and moving on from some of these players. And that's the issue, is there are so many forwards and limited roles. Like, you have Jonathan Huberdeau locked up for the next 6 years, 5 or 6 years. You have Kadri locked up for 4 more years. Backlund wants to stay. Blake Coleman's here for another 2 years. Farabee, Sharon Govich is here for another 5. Like, there's got to be some way to move around some of these players that just have done their time here in Calgary and maybe are looking to go contend or do something else outside of the Flames roster. And this is where you get me, okay? The defensive pairings. Joel Hanley and Mackenzie Weegar as your top pairing. Kevin Ball and Rasmus Anderson, followed by Braden Pahal and Zane Parekh on your third pair. And then your 4 extras. 4. Jake Bean and Miramonov, Solo, and Hunter Brusewicz. And they also signed Kuznetsov, or re-signed him. So you could technically ice 2 whole defensive groups if you really needed to. You wouldn't, but I think that my biggest gripe is, of course, this logjam, because you have a good group of forwards. Like, that's an issue in itself, but you have a defensive prospect who is on the cusp of being an NHL player. Like, he is there, but there is a few stop signs in his way, a few hurdles, and it's not about his playing ability or anything like that. It's the fact that you have Jake Bean, Solo, Kuznetsov, and Miramonov in his way. The 3 of those guys, or really Bean and Miramonov, are the ones that are going to be on your NHL roster when Miro could have been traded last season, and Jake Bean should probably be waived because he's taking up a valuable spot. And if you want this team to get younger and better, emphasis on better, you have to let the better younger players in. And I really don't think that they're going to waive Jake Bean. I don't even think they would have signed Jake Bean had there not been that connection with his father formerly being part of the organization in a leadership role. But Zane Parekh should absolutely be playing at the NHL level. He cannot go to the AHL, and sending him to the O is just stupid. It is counterproductive. So if that means you have to make a hard decision and waive a guy like Miro or Jake Bean, then do it. You could have avoided this by trading Rasmus Anderson. And I know that things haven't worked out that way, but this all could have been avoided. And my biggest question is, how do we fix this? Because it's not just Rasmus Anderson and his playing time that's at stake here. There are players waiting in the wings, and they shouldn't have to have their development pushed back and delayed because poor management. But coming up next, we're going to talk about some more management with Ryan Huska, because the average shelf life of an NHL coach right now is 2.4 seasons, which it used to be 3. Now it's 2.4. And he's entering his 3rd season, so he is technically beyond that average shelf life. But what are the expectations? Is he meeting them? Is he exceeding them? And would it make sense for him to stick around? Coming up next on Locked On Flames. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a cannot-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 $100 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because the app is super easy to use, super easy to navigate, simple, and just unbelievably easy for someone who is technologically illiterate like me to put together same game parlays or whatever I am in the mood for. I think that you should probably take a look at the Packers and maybe something to do with Michael Parsons' futures bets there. Don't put your money on the Cowboys if you like saving money. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting fanduel.com to get started. That is fanduel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames and making the show part of your day. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. When I think of the Flames, like pre-Huska, I think of them going through coaches like most people go through underwear. I feel like they had a new coach just about every other season. And prior to Huska taking over as the head coach, it was Bill Peters, who was, of course, let go. And was he technically suspended? And then Geoff Ward came in as interim head coach and then was hired as the head coach, fired mid-season. Sutter came in, and then Sutter had 2.5 seasons and, of course, got fired and sent back to the farm. And Huska has been the head coach since, and he's heading into his 3rd season. So I think when you look at the biggest difference between Huska's responsibilities and expectations versus those previous coaches, those coaches all had weapons like Tkachuk, Gaudreau, Monahan. The defensive groups there were truly one of the top defensive cores in the league. And now we're sitting here arguing about Jake Beaton. Oliver Shillington just signed a PTO. Noah Hannafin's in Vegas. Rasmus Anderson's on his way out. Chris Tanev is in Toronto. Like, the personnel has changed drastically. And so, obviously, so have the expectations. Because you can't expect this group to go out and win you 2 playoff rounds. I think that this team has won 2 playoff rounds in like 20 years, which is unacceptable in itself, but that is a problem that we will address later down the road. I think that Huska has a little bit more leeway, mainly because everyone is aware of the changes as well as the realistic expectations. I'm sorry, but you can't expect this team to go out and win you a Stanley Cup. This isn't a group that is built to do that. Dustin Wolf is your star player. You need to continue to build a roster full of high-end talent. And I think that's obviously still a work in progress. And Huska's doing what he can to get the most out of his players, I would say. I think that there are certainly some decisions that I question, but at the end of the day, I question a lot of decisions made by most coaches. So it's not like it's just him doing something wrong. I think with the state of the Flames and their organization and where they're at in terms of a rebuild, I don't think that Huska's on the hot seat in the slightest. I don't think that that is on anyone's radar necessarily, but I do think there could be some questions if the Flames narrowly miss the playoffs again. I don't want to say it like sends off alarm bells, but I think that it does raise some eyebrows because you're so close again and you couldn't get it done. Could you have made a different coaching decision in a game where, it was a late third period goal and you ended up losing within the final minute of the game or something like that? I think that there is, again, more leeway for Huska, but you have to wonder, is he failing to meet expectations? If the expectations last season were to be a playoff team, yeah, he did not get them to the playoffs. But this season, if you're a little bit more realistic and say, okay, like, we're essentially the same team as last year. We'd love to make the playoffs, but if, that doesn't happen, just, I don't want to say go out and have fun, but if you miss the playoffs, it's not this soul crushing event. I think that it's realistic to expect them to miss the playoffs. I think it's far more realistic to expect them to miss the playoffs than it is to expect them to make it and do something. But with Huska, there is that different set of expectations. I think Conroy runs things very differently than Brad Treliving, and I think that there's a little bit more runway for himself too, because I think with the new building opening, with that kind of cushion to really build a playoff team, you're okay. And we know that Brad Treliving made how many questionable decisions, and he didn't lose his job. So I just don't think that we have to worry about either of them being canned unless something ridiculous happens. But I don't foresee that at all. And coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show discussing, where are they going to finish? Because last season, I thought that the Sharks were going to finish ahead of them, which was very wrong. But I do wonder if that prediction potentially comes true again, or comes true this time around, because, well, the Sharks are doing things to certainly improve their team. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. With the Flames being in this in-between phase situation that they're in, you have to look at this team for what it is. And you can dissect that by looking at who they are on paper and what previous years with this team and with this group what they've given you and what they've shown you. And we've seen that. This is relatively the same group that they had last season and for most of the season prior. So, what does this group tell you? It tells you that they aren't a high-scoring group. In fact, they are second to last when it comes to scoring. They have good goaltending. They've got a decent defensive group. They're older, and they are lacking that high-end offensive talent. So, when you stack them up against teams that made the playoffs, where do you see them? there aren't too many. Maybe it's the good goaltending that gets circled in both columns. Maybe it's solid defense. Special teams needs a complete reset. They have to figure something out there. And I think one thing that they have to look forward to there is Zane Parekh coming in to eventually quarterback the power play. But when I'm looking at teams in the Pacific Division that I think the Flames may finish behind, most of this division, really, I think the only two that I would consider them maybe finishing ahead of would maybe be the Ducks and the Kraken. Maybe. I don't know. I think the Ducks might be slightly better this season. But I do think the Sharks finish ahead of them. And if you go listen to JD Young from Locked On Sharks talk about what the Sharks are doing to put them at an advantage or to push them to this next level in their rebuild, it makes sense. Unfortunately, the Flames, they're getting younger, but they're not making the decisions that the Sharks made. And I'm not talking about tanking and being bad. It's a matter of them moving out veterans and becoming a much younger group and an inexperienced group. I'm not saying you have to trade away every veteran, everyone over the age of 25. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But you have to move key pieces out. And by key pieces, I mean old players. We saw the Sharks do it with Jumbo Joe, the Joe Pavelski situation where he went to Dallas, Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson. Like, there are a number of players that departed the organization and eventually allowed the Sharks to bring in these younger players that, yeah, they weren't all that experienced, but doing that was a domino effect that led them to be one of the worst teams in the league a number of times and get players like Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, like Eklund. Like, there are a number of players that they were able to acquire through the draft after they move veterans out. So, if you're picking up what I'm putting down there, I just think it would be something to examine. Maybe Craig Conroy makes a phone call to Mike Greer and says, "Hi, can you help me out? I'm not looking for a step-by-step instruction, but you've done this. What can I learn from you? Or what do you wish you did differently?" Something like that. Because after all, the NHL is a copycat league. There was a model put out by, I believe it was Jay Fresh, that has the Flames finishing in the bottom 3 of the league. Obviously, it's a projected model. There's no concrete evidence that that's what's going to happen. It is not a crystal ball, not a mind reader. No one can see into the future. But based on the statistics that he builds his formulas off of, the Flames are finishing in the bottom 3. And that's good. That's good because this is, again, a really good draft class. I don't see the Flames ever winning the draft lottery. However, I do think that another top 10 pick would be fantastic for this team, especially in a draft year that's very similar to Zane Parex's draft class in terms of deep talent. I would love to say that the Flames are in a position to take this next step forward and be a playoff team. I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think that you want that to be the case right now. You want them to do what they need to do to lay a foundation for a strong, perennial contending team. And that does not happen overnight. The same way that San Jose's rebuild didn't happen overnight, Chicago's is not happening overnight, Detroit, Ottawa. Don't even look at Buffalo because they are such an extreme, odd outlier that it's not worth taking into consideration. The Flames know how to develop young players. They have every opportunity to take advantage of this situation that lies ahead of them. And yeah, I would love to see this team in the playoffs again. But I don't want them to show up for one round and win one game. We've done that. And it's not fun. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. But that will do it for me here on this episode of Locked On Flames as we continue through the off season and work our way through as the players start to trickle back into Calgary. Make sure you check out Locked On Sharks and Locked On NHL in general. There are a lot of great shows and hosts with lots of insight and expertise. And I will see you all later. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And I will see you all next week. Have a fantastic long weekend.